Okay, and before we get started on today's video, I just want to quickly give credit to the creator of this video, which is a documentary from quite a fair time ago about the early prospectors in Australia, made by a man called Graham Beck. And I have contacted him, and he's given me permission to use this video to sort of help go through some of those really, really important parts of the lead up to the gold rush. So we're going to watch these in little parts, and I'm going to go through them and stop them at certain times. I am apologetic if I stop them when you didn't want me to, but sometimes some of these things need a little bit of explanation. All right, so let's see how we go.
This is the story of men and women who have made nations great. Those who had a dream, and in many cases died for it. It is the story of courage, perseverance, tenacity, and greed. And while this story is set in Australia, it could be in any country, where people driven by an insatiable search for great wealth risked all. The stakes were high, and the success rates were low. Many characters became part of our folklore, and in some cases myth may have overtaken fact. But there is no denying one fact. These were no ordinary people. They were the prospectors.
Really quickly, that's what we're going to call the people that are not gold miners. We're going to call them prospectors, okay? I don't think I realized how long this intro was, but just keep.
Australia in 1851 was losing its small colonial population to the Californian goldfields. But a flamboyant man by the name of Edward Hargreaves was about to change all that. Hargreaves had recognised the similarity between Bathurst and the Californian goldfields from which he had recently returned. He was certain there was gold at Bathurst, and after much ridicule from the Sydney public, the lone figure rode into the bush in the beginning of 1851.
Okay, so really quickly there, a man called Edward Hargreaves, who'd been over at the California Gold Rush and seen where they found gold there, had seen that in Bathurst, which is about 4 hours drive out of Sydney, would have been a fair distance out of Sydney back then on horseback, looked a lot like the California goldfield, so he set out to try to find gold in Australia.
It was a ride into history. Along the way, he recruited a guide, a young man by the name of John Lister. And on the 12th of February, they arrived at Lewis Ponds Creek.
I found myself in country I was anxiously longing to behold again. My recollection had not deceived me. The resemblance to that of the California goldfields could not be mistaken. I felt myself surrounded by gold. My guide went for water to drink, and after making a hasty repast, I told him that we were now in the goldfields and that the gold was under his feet. I dug a pan full of dirt and washed it. The young boy stared in disbelief. There, in the bottom of the pan, lay a speck of the precious metal. I then washed 5 panfuls in succession, obtaining gold from all but one. To describe my feelings at that eventful moment would be impossible.
And so the first gold rush in Australia was about to begin. The two men were joined by Lister's friends James and William Tom, and Hargreaves set out to claim the large reward for discovering Australia's first payable goldfield.
Okay, so at this point in time, he's gone to this place that looked like the California goldfields, and he's used a pan, and he's panned 5 different lots of it, and he's found a little bits of specks of gold in each of them. Now, that doesn't mean anything yet, because that just means that gold has been found in Australia. But to actually have a gold thing that's a payable gold field where someone pays you a large chunk of money to say, we want to actually search here, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a bigger chunk to sort of prove to everyone that they could sell this land to have a payable gold field. So they haven't actually gotten there yet. They've just found traces of gold, and they've set these two brothers called the Tom brothers out to try to find more.
Meanwhile, the boys continued to work along the riverbank, but with little success. They then moved several miles downstream to the junction at Summerhill Creek, where in 5 days they recovered 4 ounces of the precious metal.
Tom, look, there's gold.
Finally, this was payable gold. Word spread slowly at first when Hargraves announced his discovery to a disbelieving public.
Okay, so just really clearly on that, the boys were looking where Hargraves told them to look, and there was nothing there. So they moved a couple of miles down to Summerhill, and the two boys, not Hargraves, the two boys had found the sense of gold, the part of gold. Hargraves had sent them to find gold, but they're the ones who found it. Now Hargraves has announced that he's actually found the payable gold, and we'll see what happens from here.
But within a few months, hundreds of prospectors converged on Bathurst, some hastily carrying their belongings and others in well-organised parties. The government quickly imposed a tax of 30 shillings a month on each digger, and in June the Commissioner of Lands reached Ophir, named by Hargraves after the biblical city of gold.
I saw over 1,000 prospectors camped along the creek, and I collected the tax with little trouble, as fortunes were being won by the early diggers.
As the rich surface gold quickly ran out, new ground was found in the surrounding areas. In July, 50 miles to the north of Bathurst, a prospector brought into town several large quartz nuggets containing over 1,200 ounces of gold. And New South Wales went mad again as this golden area was rushed. In recognition of the initial discovery, Hargraves was given a reward of £10,000 by the government.
£10,000 back then would have been huge. It would have made him very, very rich.
However, storm clouds began to appear on the horizon. Lister and the Tom brothers protested about the reward, claiming they were the true discoverers of the first payable goldfield. The tenacious Lister pursued justice for over 40 years, until finally, just before Hargraves's death, the second inquiry found in favour of the boys.
Although Mr. Hargraves is entitled to the credit of having taught the claimants, Messrs. W. and J. Tom, and Mr. Lister, the use of the dish and the cradle, and otherwise the proper methods of searching for gold, this committee is satisfied that Messrs. Tom and Lister were undoubtedly the first discoverers of gold in Australia in payable quantities.
After 40 years and 2 official inquiries, Lister and the Tom brothers received the sum of a little over £300 each, while Hargraves's name is indelibly carved in Australian history.
Pretty much every worksheet you go into now, every time you look up gold discovery in Australia, the one name that comes up is Edward Hargraves. He is the name that, even if after 40 years of going through the courts to try to find whether it was the Tom brothers and the Lister and John Lister who were the ones who actually found the first goldfield, it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter who won that final court battle. All that people know or care about now is Edward Hargraves. That's the name that still gets brought up as the person who found gold in Australia. I guess it raises a really good question as to who you want to, not even who you want to believe, but what do you decide about who you think was the person who was the one who found the gold in Australia, the payable goldfield. So let's go back through it again. Edward Hargraves sets out to search for gold because he says that it seems like the same land, the California gold rush. He hires a guide called John Lister to show him into the parts of Bathurst and surrounding to try to find him that place. They find that together. They search through the pan and they find the small little specks. Hargraves realizes that he's onto something good, and he hires 2 boys to try to find, boys like young men, to try to find him enough gold to call it a payable goldfield. They search where he asked them to search and they can't find anything. So they move downstream a couple of kilometers and end up finding something that is worthwhile to say a payable goldfield. Then they pay it out all to Edward Hargraves and give him the full credit for having found the first payable goldfield. Technically, he did hire people to sort of do that for him. I don't know how much he paid them. I don't know that. But who do you believe, but what do you decide as the person who found it? I guess if you hired someone, then technically they're working for you, so you could claim that you're the one who actually found it. Or they're saying that we didn't actually find it where you told us to find it. We actually had to look somewhere else to find it. But as you heard in that story, they went and tried to fight Edward Hargraves for 30 years in the courts to try to get something back. But in that 30 years, Hargraves would have spent that $10,000 and made him a very rich man. And after those 30 or 40 years, the boys only got $300 out of all that. Probably spent more than $300 on fighting it for that long in the courts. Yes, they said that they were actually the ones who found it, but like I said, history doesn't remember those two. History does not remember the Tom brothers or John Lister as the people who found gold in Australia, the payable goldfield, sorry. It only really remembers Edward Hargraves. And you can see that this also in the video shows that within a little bit of time, people were just picking up tools and walking or getting to the goldfields or coming on a horse and cart and just down by the riverbanks. And the only way that the government could try to make money out of this was to start charging people to mine, to prospect. So they're just in the river, on the side of the river, just getting small little flakes, probably not making it that big. But initially, they would have been the first people there. So any gold that was there, they would have been the ones who found it. And then it started spreading out more and more. And then at the end of this video, they talk about that someone found a huge amount of gold in one part just north of Bathurst. And that was when gold fever kind of hit. So that's just a quick intro into the discovery of gold in Australia. Now, after they said that the population of Australia, New South Wales, had started going to California when the goldfields happened, but now everyone's going to start coming back to Australia. Anyway, I hope that's been a really good look at the first little part of how prospecting and gold mining started in Australia. So remember, Edward Hargraves is the one who's credited as the one of finding the first goldfield. Then we have John Lister, who was his guide who showed him out there. And then we have the Tom brothers, who were the ones who were sent out to try to find enough gold to call it a payable goldfield and get $10,000 for that land for everyone else to mine on. All right, thanks for watching. And we'll go through more next time.